Most people would walk right past this penny without a second glance. It looks ordinary, worn, forgettable. But what if I told you that a small brown coin from 1952, sitting quietly in a jar or drawer, could carry a story that connects World War history, American industry, and a collector market that still surprises people today? This is the 1952 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, also known as the 1952 Philadelphia cent. It's a 1-cent coin made during a time when America was rebuilding after World War II, entering the Cold War and shaping the modern economy. On the surface, it's just another Lincoln penny, but once you understand its background, production story, and the subtle details collectors look for, this coin becomes something much more interesting. Let's go back to 1952. The United States was in the middle of huge changes. Soldiers had returned home. Factories that once built tanks and planes were now producing cars, appliances, and homes. The Korean War had begun. Television was entering American living rooms, and every day, millions of Americans were using pennies just like this one to buy newspapers, candy, and cups of coffee. In 1952, the U.S. Mint struck pennies at 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Coins from Denver carry a small D, and coins from San Francisco carry an S, but pennies from Philadelphia, including this one, had no mint mark at all. That's why collectors call it the 1952 no-mint mark penny. At the time, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for over 40 years. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. That made it the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person instead of a symbolic figure like Liberty. By 1952, Americans were deeply familiar with Lincoln's calm profile on the front of the coin and the 2 wheat stalks on the back, which gave rise to the nickname Wheat Penny. This design, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, had become one of the most recognizable coins in U.S. history. It symbolized honesty, unity, and hard-earned money, all values Americans strongly believed in during the post-war era. The 1952 penny is made mostly of copper. Specifically, it contains about 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. That gives it its rich reddish-brown color when new, and its darker brown tone as it ages. These copper cents feel heavier than modern pennies and produce a softer sound when dropped. Many collectors say that holding one feels like holding a piece of real history. On the front, you'll see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1952 to the right. On the back, you'll see United States of America and 1 cent framed by 2 wheat stalks, with E pluribus unum across the top. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. But collectors know that the smallest differences in coins can mean big differences in value. One of the most important things about the 1952 no-mint mark penny is how many were made. The Philadelphia Mint struck more than 186 million of them that year. That sounds like a massive number, and it is. These coins were everywhere. They passed through hands at grocery stores, gas stations, movie theaters, and school cafeterias. Most were heavily used, scratched, and eventually lost or melted. Because of that, finding a worn 1952 penny today isn't hard, but finding one in excellent condition is another story. Over time, coins wear down. The fine lines in Lincoln's hair fade. The wheat stalks on the reverse lose detail. The surface becomes dull or scratched. Collectors care deeply about condition, and even small improvements in appearance can increase a coin's value dramatically. But condition isn't the only thing that matters. Errors and unusual varieties also make certain 1952 pennies much more desirable. For example, some 1952 cents were struck slightly off-center, causing part of the design to be missing. Others show doubled lettering, where parts of the date or inscriptions appear doubled due to a misaligned die during minting. These error coins weren't intentional, but today they're among the most exciting finds for collectors. There are also repunched mint mark varieties for Denver and San Francisco coins, but for the no mint mark Philadelphia issue, Collectors mainly focus on doubling, strike quality, and overall preservation. Now you might be wondering, is the 1952 no mint mark penny rare? In everyday condition, no. Millions still exist. But rarity in coin collecting isn't just about how many were made. It's about how many survive in high-quality condition. And that's where this coin becomes much more interesting. Most 1952 pennies were heavily circulated. Very few were saved in pristine condition at the time. As a result, coins graded in top condition today are surprisingly scarce. In coin grading, collectors use a scale from poor condition all the way up to perfect mint state. A worn 1952 penny might be worth only a few cents above face value, but a bright, sharply struck, uncirculated example can be worth tens, hundreds, or even thousands of dollars, depending on its quality and color. Color plays a major role too. Copper coins are graded not just by wear, but by how much of their original red color remains. A coin labeled red has retained most of its original mint color. A red-brown coin has some remaining brightness. A brown coin has darkened over time. Red coins are much rarer and far more valuable. Let's look at real-world examples. In recent years, a 1952 no mint mark Lincoln penny graded in high mint state condition with full red color has sold at major auctions for several $100s. Some top-grade examples have reached well over $1,000. These prices surprise many people, especially those who think wheat pennies are always common and inexpensive. Era coins can sell for even more. A genuine double-die 1952 penny in strong condition can bring hundreds or thousands of dollars, depending on the strength of the doubling and the overall quality of the coin. Off-center strikes and other mint errors also attract serious collector interest. So how do you know if your 1952 penny is real, valuable, or just another common cent? First, check the date and mint mark area. A true 1952 no mint mark penny will have no letter below the date. That means it was struck in Philadelphia. Next, examine the coin's condition. Look at Lincoln's hair, cheekbone, and jawline. Are the details sharp or worn flat? Flip the coin and look at the wheat stalks. Are the lines clear or mostly smooth? Then look at the surface. Is it bright and glossy or dark and scratched? Are there unusual features like doubling, missing letters, or strange shapes at the edges? If anything looks unusual, that's a good sign to investigate further. Be cautious of fakes or altered coins. Some people try to remove mint marks from Denver or San Francisco coins to make them appear as no mint mark varieties, even though the no mint mark version itself is normal for Philadelphia. Others try to create fake errors by damaging coins intentionally. Real mint errors usually show smooth metal flow and natural patterns, while damage often looks rough or uneven. If you believe you've found something special, the best next step is to show it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a professional grading service. Authentication and grading can confirm what you really have and protect you if you decide to sell. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1952 penny. In 1952, the average price of a new car in America was under $2,000. A loaf of bread cost around 16 cents. Gas was about 27 cents per gallon. That means this penny could buy a lot more in its day than it can today. Holding one is like holding a tiny piece of everyday life from 70 years ago. Another interesting detail is that 1952 pennies were made entirely of copper, unlike modern pennies, which are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That means older pennies like this one have intrinsic metal value and they feel noticeably heavier in your hand. Also, the wheat penny design ended just 6 years later in 1958, when it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse. That makes the 1952 penny part of the final chapter of the classic wheat cent era, which many collectors consider the most beautiful and nostalgic period of American coinage. Collectors today love the 1952 no mint mark penny for several reasons. First, it's accessible. Many people already own one without realizing it. Second, It connects directly to mid-20th century American history. Third, it offers both beginner-friendly affordability and high-end collectible potential, depending on condition and variety. For new collectors, it's an easy entry point into wheat pennies. For experienced collectors, it's a challenge to find in top-grade red condition. And for treasure hunters, it's a reminder that valuable coins don't always look dramatic or ancient. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight. There's also something deeply satisfying about finding a coin like this in circulation, an old jar, or a family collection. It creates a moment of connection, not just to money, but to time itself. Someone in 1952 held that same coin. Maybe they used it to buy a newspaper about the Korean War, or candy for their child, or coffee during a long workday. And now, decades later, it's in your hands. That's the real magic of coins like the 1952 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. They're small, quiet witnesses to history. They don't shout, they don't sparkle, but they carry stories and sometimes surprising value. So the next time you see an old penny with no mint mark and the date 1952, don't dismiss it. Take a closer look. Check its condition. Look for sharp details, bright color, or strange features. You might be holding nothing more than a piece of spare change. Or you might be holding a coin that collectors have been searching for, one that connects you directly to America's past in a way few objects can. And that's what makes coin collecting so powerful. It's not just about money, it's about discovery, it's about curiosity, it's about the thrill of realizing that something small and ordinary might actually be something rare and meaningful. Because sometimes, history isn't locked in museums or hidden in vaults. Sometimes, it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting to be noticed. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second glance. But what if I told you that a single 1956 Lincoln penny sitting quietly in a jar or drawer could be worth far more than 1 cent, and in rare cases, hundreds or even thousands of dollars? Today, we're uncovering the hidden story behind one of America's most overlooked coins, the 1956 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. The 1956 Lincoln cent is a small copper coin with a big story. It was minted in Philadelphia, which is why it has no mint mark under the date. For everyday Americans in the 1950s, this penny was just pocket change, used to buy candy, newspapers, or a cup of coffee refill. But decades later, collectors look at this same coin very differently. What once passed unnoticed now carries history, craftsmanship, and in some cases, serious value. To understand this coin, we need to step back into America in 1956. The country was in the middle of a post-war boom. Families were buying homes, televisions were becoming common, and the U.S. economy was growing fast. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, Elvis Presley was climbing the charts, and Americans were optimistic about the future. In that world, the Lincoln cent remained a constant, just as it had since 1909. The Lincoln penny was first introduced to honor Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday. It was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person instead of a symbolic figure like Liberty. By 1956, the design had been in circulation for nearly half a century, and Americans trusted it. It felt familiar, it felt permanent, and yet no one at the time could have guessed that ordinary pennies from this year would one day be studied, graded, and auctioned like tiny works of art. The 1956 no-mint mark penny was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which produced over 420 million of them. That sounds like a huge number, and it is. But survival in perfect condition is a very different story. Most of these coins went straight into circulation, where they were scratched, worn down, and damaged over time. The few that survived in pristine shape are now the ones collectors fight over. This penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. That means it weighs about 3.11 grams and has a warm reddish tone when new. On the front, or obverse, you see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, and behind him is the date 1956. There is no mint mark, which tells us it was struck in Philadelphia. On the back, or reverse, you'll find two wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, with E pluribus unum across the top. This is known as the wheat penny design, used from 1909 until 1958. Just 2 years after this coin was minted, the reverse would change to the Lincoln Memorial design. That means the 1956 penny belongs to the final era of classic wheat cents, which adds to its historical appeal. At first glance, the 1956 penny looks just like many others from the 1950s. But collectors know that tiny differences can make a massive difference in value. One of the most important factors is condition. A well-worn example that has been in circulation for decades might only be worth a few cents above face value. But a sharply struck, fully red coin that looks almost brand new can be worth hundreds, and in some cases, much more. The color of the coin matters too. Collectors categorize copper cents as red, red-brown, or brown. Red coins retain most of their original mint luster and color. These are the most desirable. Red-brown coins show some toning, but still retain traces of their original brightness. Brown coins are fully toned from years of exposure and handling. A 1956 penny in full red condition is far rarer than one that has turned brown over time. Another important detail is strike quality. Some coins were struck more sharply than others, meaning Lincoln's hair, cheekbone, and jawline appear crisp and well-defined. The wheat stalks on the reverse should also show strong detail. Coins with strong strikes tend to grade higher and command higher prices. But what really makes the 1956 penny exciting for collectors are errors and varieties. These are mistakes that happened during the minting process, and while they were accidental, they can dramatically increase a coin's value. One of the most sought-after errors from this era is the doubled die variety, where parts of the design appear doubled because the die used to strike the coin was misaligned during manufacturing. Some 1956 pennies show doubling in the date or lettering, especially around Liberty or In God We Trust. These aren't always easy to see with the naked eye, but under magnification, the doubling can become clear. Authentic doubled die coins are rare and can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on condition and strength of the doubling. Other errors include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and repunched mint marks, although repunched mint marks wouldn't apply to Philadelphia coins since there's no mint mark. Still, striking errors like broad strikes or coins struck on the wrong planchet are possible and highly collectible. So how valuable is the average 1956 no mint mark penny? In circulated condition, most examples are worth between 1 and 5 cents. That's barely more than face value. But in uncirculated condition, especially red examples, the value rises quickly. A nice uncirculated red 1956 penny can sell for $5 to $15. Higher grade examples certified by professional grading services have sold for much more. Some top-grade specimens have sold for over $100, and in rare cases, exceptional coins graded near perfect have reached several $100s. Error coins, especially strong doubled dies, can sell for hundreds to thousands depending on rarity and condition. That's the difference between pocket change and a collector's treasure, and it all comes down to details most people never notice. Let's look at real-world examples. In recent years, certified 1956 pennies graded in high mint state red condition have sold at major auctions for anywhere between $75 and $250. Coins with outstanding eye appeal and near-perfect surfaces sometimes push even higher. Meanwhile, genuine error coins from this year, especially strong doubled dies, have crossed the $1,000 mark when demand is high and supply is low. What makes these prices remarkable is that the coin itself originally cost just 1 cent and was meant to circulate endlessly. Yet today, collectors treat certain examples like rare artifacts, preserving them in plastic holders and studying them under magnification. If you think you might have a 1956 no mint mark penny worth more than face value, The first step is knowing how to identify a real one. Start with the date. It should clearly read 1956 with no letter below it. If there's no D or S mint mark, that means it came from Philadelphia, which is exactly what we are looking for. Next, check the weight. A genuine 1956 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter or heavier, it could be damaged or altered. Look closely at the edges and surfaces for signs of tampering. Real coins will show natural wear patterns, while altered coins often show unusual scratches, tool marks, or unnatural shine. To look for double die errors, use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom. Examine the date and the words, Liberty, and In God We Trust. If you see clear separation between letters or numbers instead of just blur or shadow, that could indicate true doubling. But be careful, many coins show machine doubling, which is common and usually adds little to no value. True doubled dies look clean and rounded, not flat or smeared. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC can authenticate and grade your coin if you believe it may be valuable. These services examine the coin's authenticity, condition, and variety, then seal it in a protective holder. While grading costs money, it can significantly increase buyer confidence and market value for higher-end coins. One surprising fact about the 1956 penny is that it was minted just 2 years before the wheat penny design ended. In 1959, the reverse changed to the Lincoln Memorial to celebrate Lincoln's 150th birthday. That means the 1956 cent belongs to the final chapter of a design that had lasted nearly 50 years. For collectors, that historical placement adds emotional and collectible appeal. Another fun detail is that these pennies are made of real copper, unlike modern cents, which are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That gives the 1956 penny a different feel, weight, and sound when dropped. Many collectors love copper cents for their rich color and old-world look, especially when they retain their original red glow. It's also fascinating to think about where these coins have been. A 1956 penny could have passed through thousands of hands. It might have been used in vending machines, dropped into school lunch money jars, or carried by someone on their way to work decades ago. Each coin carries a silent history that no one can fully trace, and yet it still exists today, waiting to be rediscovered. Collectors love the 1956 no mint mark penny because it sits at the intersection of history, accessibility, and hidden potential. It's affordable enough for beginners, yet rare enough in top condition to excite serious collectors. It's a coin that rewards careful looking, patience, and curiosity. You don't need to be wealthy to collect it, but you do need to pay attention. This penny also appeals to people who enjoy treasure hunting in everyday places. Unlike ancient gold coins or museum-level rarities, 1956 pennies still show up in old collections, inherited jars, and even circulation once in a while. That possibility, however small, keeps collectors searching. The idea that a life-changing coin might already be in your home is powerful. What makes the 1956 penny especially interesting is how invisible it once was. No one saved these coins when they were new. They were spent, ignored, and forgotten. And yet, decades later, they've become time capsules of American history. They remind us that value isn't always obvious in the moment. Sometimes it takes time, perspective, and curiosity for something ordinary to become extraordinary. So if you have a jar of old pennies or a box passed down from a parent or grandparent, take a closer look. Find the wheat pennies, check the dates, look for 1956, examine the color, the details, and the surfaces. You might be holding a small piece of history and possibly something far more valuable than you ever expected. The 1956 no mint mark Lincoln penny may not look like treasure at first glance, but beneath its copper surface lies a story of American growth, craftsmanship, and chance. It represents an era when money was metal, designs were engraved by hand, and millions of coins carried the same image of a president who shaped the nation. And the most exciting part is this. Somewhere right now, In a forgotten jar, drawer, or coin album, there could be a perfectly preserved 1956 penny waiting to be discovered. It might already belong to you. You just haven't noticed it yet. What if I told you that one of the most overlooked pennies in American history might be hiding in your pocket change right now, quietly carrying a story tied to national panic, silver shortages, and one of the biggest shifts in U.S. coinage ever made? Today, we're uncovering the surprising story of the 1965 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny. The 1965 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin featuring President Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. It has no mint mark, which means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, it looks just like millions of other pennies from the 1960s. But this coin was made during one of the most dramatic moments in U.S. coin history, and that alone gives it a fascinating backstory that collectors love. To understand why the 1965 penny matters, we need to travel back to the mid-1960s. The United States was facing a serious coin shortage. Silver prices were rising fast, and people were pulling silver coins out of circulation to hoard them or melt them down. Dimes, quarters, and half-dollars were disappearing from everyday use. Vending machines ran out of change. Banks struggled to supply businesses. The government realized something had to change quickly. In 1965, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, one of the most important laws in modern U.S. minting history. This law removed silver from most circulating coins and replaced it with cheaper metals. It was also during this time that the U.S. Mint made a surprising decision. They removed mint marks from all coins from 1965 through 1967. The idea was to discourage collectors from hoarding coins based on where they were made. The goal was simple: keep coins in circulation and get the economy moving again. That's why the 1965 Lincoln penny has no mint mark. Even though it was struck in Philadelphia, the mint mark was intentionally left off. This small detail ties the coin directly to a major turning point in American money history. Now let's look at the design itself. On the front, or obverse, is the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. Lincoln was the first real person to appear on a regular U.S. coin, and his image has remained on the penny ever since. The design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, and his initials, VDB, appear on the shoulder of Lincoln's coat. On the back of the 1965 penny is the Lincoln Memorial, a design that debuted in 1959, replacing the earlier wheat ears design. If you look closely at the memorial, you can actually see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the building, making this one of the few U.S. coins that shows the same person on both sides. The 1965 penny is made mostly of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. This is the same metal composition used for pennies for decades before the U.S. Mint switched to copper-plated zinc in 1982. That makes the 1965 penny heavier and richer in copper than modern pennies, and some people even collect them in bulk for their metal content alone, though their value as metal is still limited by law. Over 1.8 billion of these pennies were minted in 1965, making it one of the highest mintage years in penny history. Because of this, most examples are very common and worth only a few cents in circulated condition. But that's not the end of the story, because within those billions of coins are rare variations, high-grade survivors, and fascinating mint errors that can be worth serious money. One of the most exciting things about the 1965 no-mint mark penny is its connection to rare transitional errors. During the mid-1960s, the mint was experimenting with different metal compositions, especially for higher denominations. While pennies remained copper in 1965, there have been reports and intense collector interest in coins that were mistakenly struck on the wrong type of planchet, meaning the blank metal disc used before striking. Some collectors have searched for 1965 pennies struck on silver-colored planchets intended for dimes or other coins. If such an error were confirmed and authenticated, it could be worth thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars, depending on condition and rarity. While these are extremely rare, the possibility alone keeps collectors carefully examining every 1965 penny they find. Another valuable category is high-grade condition coins. Most 1965 pennies were heavily circulated and show wear, scratches, and dull surfaces. But coins that survived in near-perfect condition, especially those graded mint state 67 or higher by professional grading services, can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. For example, a 1965 Lincoln penny, graded MS67, read by a major grading service, has sold at auction for over $1,000. Even slightly lower grades, like MS66 red, can bring prices ranging from $100 to $300 depending on demand. These values are driven by rarity in condition, not rarity in mintage. When billions are made, finding one that looks almost flawless decades later becomes incredibly difficult. Then there are mint errors. These are mistakes that happen during the striking process, and collectors love them because they are unique and unpredictable. Some known errors on 1965 pennies include off-center strikes, where part of the design is missing because the blank wasn't properly aligned. Doubled dies, where parts of the design appear doubled due to a misaligned die. Clipped planchets, where a piece of the coin is missing, and die cracks or cuds, where raised metal appears due to cracks in the striking die. A dramatic off-center 1965 penny can sell for $50 to $200 or more, depending on how much of the design is visible and how centered the strike is. A strong doubled die example, especially one visible without magnification, can sell for several $100s. Larger and more visually striking errors can go even higher. So how do you know if your 1965 penny might be valuable? First, check the date and confirm there is no mint mark under the year. That's normal for this coin. Next, look at the condition. Is the coin bright red with sharp details and no visible wear? Or is it brown and worn down from years in circulation? Color matters a lot to collectors. Red coins are worth significantly more than red-brown or brown ones. Then check for errors. Use a magnifying glass and look closely at the lettering, the date, and Lincoln's profile. Are any letters doubled? Is the coin off-center? Does the rim look uneven or missing in spots? Does the coin weigh differently than a normal penny? A standard 1965 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. Anything significantly lighter or heavier could indicate an error or wrong planchet strike. Also be cautious of fakes or altered coins. While fake 1965 pennies are uncommon because most examples are low value, altered error coins do exist. Some people try to create fake errors by filing edges, hammering coins, or altering dates. A real mint error usually shows smooth metal flow and natural striking characteristics, while fake damage often looks rough, uneven, or artificial. If you think you've found something special, the best next step is to have it examined by a reputable coin dealer or submit it to a professional grading service. Authentication not only confirms what you have, but can dramatically increase its market value if it turns out to be genuine and rare. Now let's talk about some real-world sales that show what this penny can be worth. As mentioned earlier, top condition examples graded MS67 red have crossed the $1,000 mark at auction. Strong error coins, such as major off-center strikes or dramatic doubled dies, have sold anywhere from $200 to over $1,500 depending on appearance and demand. Even more modest errors like clipped planchets can sell for $20 to $100. These prices may surprise people who think all pennies are worth just 1 cent. But in the coin world, rarity of condition and uniqueness often matter more than how many were originally made. A coin that looks ordinary at first glance can become extraordinary under closer inspection. There are also some fascinating facts about the year 1965 itself. This was the first year-clad dimes and quarters entered circulation, meaning they no longer contained silver. Many Americans didn't trust the new coins at first and believed they were cheaper or less valuable. Some even refused to accept them. Meanwhile, older silver coins vanished almost overnight as people hoarded them, creating a lasting divide between real money and new money in public perception. The penny, however, stayed copper, and that made it familiar and trusted. In a strange way, the humble 1965 penny became one of the last links to the older metal traditions of American coinage during a time of massive change. Another fun detail is that because mint marks were removed from 1965 to 1967, collectors can't easily tell which mint produced which coins from those years. This adds a layer of mystery and uniformity to the coins, making them feel like a special chapter in U.S. minting history. Collectors today love the 1965 no-mint mark penny not because it's rare in general, but because it represents a turning point. It sits at the crossroads of old and new, of silver and clad, of tradition and change. It's a coin that marks the moment when American money entered the modern era. For beginners, it's also a perfect coin to start with. It's easy to find, affordable, and full of learning opportunities. You can practice grading, error spotting, and color evaluation using this coin alone. And every once in a while, someone really does find a high-grade or error example in old rolls, jars, or inherited collections, turning a 1-cent coin into a surprising treasure. Even if your 1965 penny isn't worth hundreds or thousands, it still carries a powerful story. It was minted during a time of national uncertainty about money, economics, and trust. It passed through countless hands, vending machines, cash registers, and piggy banks. It may have bought a newspaper, a candy bar, or part of a gallon of gas in a very different America. And today, decades later, it still survives, quietly waiting in drawers, jars, and pockets, holding its place as one of the most historically meaningful modern pennies ever made. So the next time you see a 1965 penny, don't dismiss it. Look at it closely, turn it over in your hand, check the details, because hidden inside that small copper coin is a story of change, crisis, innovation, and history. And every once in a while, hidden inside one of those coins is something even more exciting, a rare error, a perfect strike, or a tiny piece of treasure no one noticed before. Who knows? The next time you dump out a jar of loose change, the coin that tells the biggest story might be the smallest one in the pile. Most people think a penny is just a penny. But what if I told you one small coin from 1969 could be the difference between pocket change and a life-changing discovery? Today, we're uncovering the surprising story behind the 1969 D. Lincoln penny, a coin that millions have handled, but very few truly understand. This coin is the 1969 Lincoln 1-cent piece with a D mint mark, meaning it was made at the Denver Mint. At first glance, it looks ordinary. Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, and the familiar copper color most Americans recognize instantly. But behind this simple design is a fascinating story of history, rare errors, collector demand, and hidden value that has turned some ordinary-looking pennies into prized treasures. The year 1969 was a time of big change in America. The country had just landed on the moon. The Vietnam War was ongoing. Technology, culture, and money were all evolving. And while Americans were focused on space exploration and social change, the U.S. Mint was quietly producing billions of pennies to keep up with everyday commerce. Pennies were still essential for buying groceries, paying tolls, and making exact change at stores. That year, pennies were struck at 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Coins from Philadelphia didn't have mint marks, while Denver coins carried a small D under the date. San Francisco mostly produced proof coins for collectors. The Denver Mint alone struck over 4 billion pennies in 1969, making the 1969 D penny extremely common in everyday circulation. But as collectors know, rarity isn't always about how many were made. Sometimes it's about what went wrong. Let's talk about what makes this coin special. The 1969 D. Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series that began in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The front of the coin shows Lincoln's profile facing right, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. On the back is the Lincoln Memorial, which replaced the wheat stalk design in 1959. The coin is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, giving it that warm reddish tone when new. It weighs about 3.11 grams and is just under 20 millimeters wide. In brand new condition, these pennies had a bright, shiny red color, but most examples today appear brown or dark from decades of handling and exposure. What makes collectors pause when they see a 1969 D penny is not the normal version. It's the possibility of rare minting errors. In the world of coin collecting, mistakes are often more valuable than perfection, and 1969 is one of those years that produced some of the most famous error pennies in American history. Now, it's important to be clear. The legendary error coin is the 1969's double die obverse, made at the San Francisco Mint. That coin has sold for tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes even more. But the 1969 D penny has its own set of rare and valuable errors that can turn a 1-cent coin into a 3, 4, or even 5-figure collectible. One of the most sought-after errors is the double die variety. This happens when the coin's design is stamped more than once in slightly different positions, causing parts of the image to appear doubled. On genuine double die coins, you might see doubling on the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust." While dramatic double dies are rare for the 1969 D penny, smaller double die varieties do exist and can be worth anywhere from $50 to several $1,000s, depending on strength and condition. Another highly collectible error is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin planchet isn't properly aligned when it's struck, causing part of the design to be missing or shifted. Some off-center 1969 D pennies have sold for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, especially if the date and mint mark are still visible. Then there are clipped planchets, where a piece of the metal blank was missing before the coin was struck, resulting in a curved or straight edge missing from the coin. These errors are popular with collectors because they're easy to spot and visually dramatic. A clipped 1969 D penny in nice condition can sell for $50 to several $100s. One of the most fascinating errors is the wrong planchet strike. In rare cases, pennies were struck on metal blanks meant for other coins, such as dimes or foreign coins. These wrong metal errors are extremely rare and can sell for thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars if authenticated. Even without errors, the 1969 D penny can still hold value in high condition. Most circulated examples are worth just 1 or 2 cents, but uncirculated coins, especially those with original red color and no wear, can sell for several dollars each. Coins graded by professional services in top condition can reach $20, $50, or more, depending on eye appeal and rarity of the grade. Let's talk about real-world values. In one auction, a 1969 D penny graded MS67 red sold for over $2,000 due to its exceptional condition and flawless surfaces. Another example with a dramatic off-center strike brought more than $1,500 at a collector auction. A clipped planchet version sold for around $300, and a strong double die example has reached prices well into the 4 figures. These numbers may sound surprising for a penny, but in the coin world, condition and rarity matter far more than face value. A perfect or unusual coin can be worth hundreds or thousands of times more than what it says on the front. But here's where things get tricky. Because of the fame surrounding the 1969 double die pennies, especially the San Francisco version, many altered or fake coins exist. Some people try to create artificial doubling by scraping or pressing the surface of a normal coin, hoping to fool collectors. Others add fake mint marks or alter dates to imitate rare varieties. So how do you tell a real 1969 penny from a fake or altered one? First, look closely at the date and lettering. Genuine doubled dies show rounded, raised doubling that looks like a second image, not flat or scratched lines. Machine doubling, which is common and not valuable, looks flat and shelf-like instead of rounded and bold. Second, check the mint mark. On genuine coins, the D should look clean and well-formed, not glued on, too thick, or oddly shaped. Fake mint marks often look uneven or sit at strange angles. Third, weigh the coin. A standard 1969 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter or heavier, it could be damaged, altered, or struck on the wrong metal. While wrong metal errors can be valuable, they should always be authenticated by professionals. Fourth, examine the edges and surfaces for signs of tampering. Filing marks, strange textures, or unusual shine can indicate the coin has been altered after leaving the mint. The safest way to confirm authenticity and value is to send the coin to a professional grading service. These experts use specialized tools and years of experience to determine if a coin is genuine, what condition it's in, and whether it has a recognized error variety. Once certified, a coin becomes much easier to sell and often much more valuable. Now, let's explore some fun facts about the 1969 penny that most people don't know. First, 1969 was one of the last years before major changes in American coin production. Just a few years later, copper would become more expensive, leading the mint to switch penny compositions to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating in 1982. That means the 1969 penny is part of the final generation of solid copper cents. Second, during this era, many Americans saved coins in jars, piggy banks, and drawers without thinking twice. Millions of 1969 pennies were tucked away and forgotten. Today, collectors still find high-grade examples in old collections, inherited coin jars, and even rolls from the bank. Third, the Lincoln Memorial design on the back actually contains a tiny image of Lincoln inside the building, making this one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person twice on a single coin. On well-preserved 1969 pennies, you can sometimes make out this tiny seated figure between the columns. Another surprising detail is how much the market can change over time. In the 1970s and 1980s, few people cared about modern pennies. Collectors focused on older coins from the 1800s and early 1900s. But as rare-era varieties gained attention and prices soared, interest in coins like the 1969 penny began to grow. Today, even modern cents are studied closely, searched by collectors, and traded actively online and at coin shows. Collectors love the 1969 penny for several reasons. First, it represents a fascinating moment in American history, a bridge between the early Lincoln cents and the modern era. Second, it offers the thrill of the hunt. Since millions of these coins still exist, there's always the possibility of finding a valuable error hiding in plain sight. Third, it's accessible. You don't need thousands of dollars to start searching for valuable pennies. Sometimes all it takes is a handful of change, a magnifying glass, and curiosity. This coin also teaches an important lesson about collectibles. Value isn't always obvious. Two coins that look nearly identical can have drastically different prices depending on tiny details most people overlook. A small doubling in a letter, a slight misalignment in a strike, or an unusual metal composition can turn an everyday object into something rare and desirable. For beginners, the 1969 penny is a perfect entry point into coin collecting. It's affordable, widely available, and full of potential surprises. For experienced collectors, it's a reminder that even modern coins can hide extraordinary stories and values. Imagine this. A penny that once bought a stick of gum or sat forgotten in a drawer is now carefully placed in a protective holder, studied under magnification, and sold at auction for hundreds or thousands of dollars. That transformation from pocket change to prized collectible is what makes coins like the 1969 penny so exciting. And here's the most exciting part. These coins are still out there. They're in old jars, inherited collections, couch cushions, piggy banks, and even in circulation. Someone, somewhere, will discover a rare 1969-era penny tomorrow, next week, or years from now, simply by paying attention to what others overlook. So the next time you see a penny with the date 1969 and a small D under it, don't rush to spend it. Take a closer look. Check the lettering, look for doubling, examine the edges and strike. You might just be holding a piece of history, and possibly a coin worth far more than 1 cent. The 1969 D. Lincoln penny may look ordinary, but its story is anything but. It represents a moment in American history, a fascinating chapter in coin production, and a reminder that valuable treasures sometimes hide in the most unexpected places. And that's what makes this coin so special. It's not just metal and numbers, it's history in your hand, it's curiosity in your pocket, and it's proof that sometimes the smallest discoveries can lead to the biggest surprises. Most people walk past pennies every day without a second thought. But what if I told you that one ordinary-looking 1979 penny with a small letter under the date could be hiding a story that surprises collectors and still sparks curiosity more than 4 decades later? Today, we're talking about the 1979 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks just like millions of other cents from the late 20th century. But behind that simple copper-colored surface is a fascinating moment in American history, a shift in how coins were made, and a few rare surprises that have turned some of these pennies into collector treasures. The 1979 D. Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small d beneath the date on the front of the coin. This was a time when pennies were still part of everyday life. People used them constantly for small purchases, change at grocery stores, and in coin jars on kitchen counters across America. Unlike today, when many people barely notice pennies, in 1979 they were still seen as real money with real buying power, even if small. The year 1979 sits right in the middle of a changing era for U.S. coinage. Just a few years earlier, the United States had switched pennies from solid copper to copper-plated zinc. Rising metal costs made it too expensive to continue making cents out of nearly pure copper, so the mint changed the composition in 1982. But in 1979, the penny was still mostly copper, made of about 95% copper with a small amount of zinc and tin. That gave it a richer color, a heavier feel, and a slightly different sound when dropped on a hard surface compared to modern pennies. The design of the 1979 D penny features Abraham Lincoln on the front, just as Lincoln's cents had since 1909. His portrait, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, shows Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above, "Liberty" to the left, and the date with the mint mark beneath. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the memorial, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside, making this one of the few U.S. coins that shows the same person on both sides. By 1979, this design had already been in use for 20 years, and most Americans were very familiar with it. But what makes this year interesting is not just the design itself, but what was happening behind the scenes at the mint. The late 1970s were a time of economic stress in the United States, with high inflation and rising production costs. The mint was looking for ways to reduce expenses, and the penny, being the lowest value coin, was under particular scrutiny. That pressure would soon lead to major changes, but the 1979 penny still represents the last stretch of the traditional copper cent era. The Denver Mint produced a massive number of pennies in 1979. In fact, more than 4 billion cents were struck there that year. That means most 1979 D pennies are not rare at all, and millions still exist today in circulation, coin jars, and old collections. But within that huge number, there are certain coins that stand out, and those are the ones that catch the attention of collectors. One of the most important things about the 1979 D penny is its metal content. Because it's mostly copper, it weighs about 3.11 grams compared to modern zinc pennies that weigh about 2.5 grams. This difference might seem small, but to collectors, it matters. It marks a point in time before the penny became lighter, cheaper, and less durable. Some collectors even call these older copper cents real pennies because of their solid feel and long-lasting surfaces. In terms of design, the 1979 D penny doesn't introduce anything new visually, but that doesn't mean it lacks interest. The quality of strikes varied, and some coins came out sharper and more detailed than others. On well-struck examples, Lincoln's hair, beard, and coat show crisp lines, and the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse are clearly defined. These sharper coins are more desirable to collectors, especially in higher grades. Now let's talk about errors, because this is where ordinary coins can become extraordinary. While most 1979 D pennies are common, a small number was struck with mistakes during the minting process. These errors happened when something went wrong with the dies, the planchets, or the striking pressure, and the results can be dramatic. One known type of error is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin isn't properly aligned in the press, causing part of the design to be missing and leaving a blank crescent shape on one side. A clearly off-center 1979 D penny, especially one where the date and mint mark are still visible, can be worth many times more than face value. Another interesting error is the double strike, where the coin is struck more than once, creating overlapping images or ghost-like outlines of Lincoln's portrait or the lettering. These coins look strange and immediately catch the eye, which is why collectors love them. There are also die cracks and die breaks, where cracks form in the metal dies used to strike coins. These cracks show up as raised lines on the coin's surface and can sometimes look like lightning bolts or strange shapes crossing Lincoln's face or the memorial building. While minor cracks are common, dramatic ones can add value and interest. Perhaps the most exciting possibility, though extremely rare, is a wrong planchet error. This happens when a penny is struck on a blank intended for another coin, such as a dime or foreign coin. A 1979 D penny struck on the wrong metal would weigh differently, look unusual in color, and could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on the specifics. So is the 1979 D penny rare or valuable? In most cases, no. A typical circulated example is worth only 1 or 2 cents, maybe a little more if copper prices rise. Even uncirculated examples, those that were never used in everyday transactions and still look brand new, usually sell for just a few cents to a few dollars. But in top condition, with strong luster and no marks, certified examples graded at the highest levels can sell for significantly more. For example, high-grade 1979 D pennies graded by professional services have sold at auction for anywhere from $50 to over $200, depending on their condition and eye appeal. While that may not sound life-changing, it's impressive for a coin that most people would otherwise ignore. And when you add in rare error coins, prices can climb even higher. Some dramatic error examples have sold for several $100s, especially when the mistake is visually striking and easy to understand. Collectors value these coins not just for their price, but for what they represent. The 1979 D penny stands at the edge of a major transition in U.S. coinage. Just a few years later, the mint would change the composition of the penny, and the copper era would quietly come to an end. That makes this coin part of the closing chapter of a long tradition that began in 1909. If you're curious about whether you might have a valuable 1979 D penny, the first step is knowing how to identify a real one. Start by looking at the front of the coin, just below the date. You should see a small D, which indicates it was minted in Denver. If there's no letter, it was made in Philadelphia. If there's an S, it came from San Francisco, usually for proof sets. Next, check the weight if you have a scale that measures grams. A genuine 1979 penny should weigh around 3.11 grams. If it weighs much less, it could be damaged, altered, or possibly struck on the wrong metal. The color should also be a rich, warm copper tone, though many coins darken or develop spots over time. Look closely at the details using a magnifying glass. Sharp lines in Lincoln's hair and beard, clear lettering, and strong details on the memorial are signs of a better strike and potentially higher value. Also, inspect the edges. A normal penny should have a smooth edge with no reading, and the thickness should be consistent all the way around. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to modify pennies to make them look like errors by filing edges, bending them, or adding marks. True mint errors usually show smooth, natural-looking distortions rather than rough tool marks. If you think you've found something unusual, it's best to have it examined by a professional coin dealer or grading service. One fun fact about the 1979 penny is that it's part of a broader story about the penny's survival itself. By the late 1970s, many economists and government officials were already questioning whether the penny was worth making at all. Production costs were rising, and inflation had reduced the penny's purchasing power. A penny in 1979 couldn't buy nearly what it could decades earlier, yet Americans still used and saved them out of habit. The 1979 D penny is a quiet reminder of that debate, which continues even today. Another interesting detail is how many of these pennies were saved simply because people thought they might someday be valuable. In the 1960s and 1970s, coin collecting was extremely popular, and many families set aside rolls of new pennies, hoping they'd become rare. As a result, a large number of 1979 D pennies still exist in uncirculated condition, which is one reason most aren't especially valuable. But it also means that finding a really perfect example with flawless surfaces and strong luster is still a challenge and a thrill for collectors. Collectors also enjoy the 1979 D penny because it's accessible. You don't need thousands of dollars to start collecting Lincoln cents, and you can often find older examples in pocket change, coin jars, or family collections. The hunt itself becomes part of the fun. Searching through rolls of pennies, hoping to spot an error or a high-grade example, connects people to the history of everyday money in a very personal way. Another surprising detail is how durable these copper pennies are compared to modern zinc ones. Copper cents tend to hold up better over time, resisting corrosion and wear more effectively. That's why many 1979 pennies still look quite good even after decades of circulation, while newer pennies often show bubbling, peeling, or rough surfaces once their thin copper plating wears through. For some collectors, the 1979 D penny also represents the nostalgia of childhood. Many people remember filling coin folders, checking off dates and mint marks, and feeling proud when they finally found that one missing coin. The Denver mint mark adds another layer of interest, reminding us that coins come from different mints across the country, each with its own history and production style. So why do collectors still care about the 1979 D penny today? It's not because most of them are worth a fortune. It's because this coin tells a story. It tells the story of a nation adjusting to economic pressure, of a mint preparing to change centuries-old traditions, and of everyday people using and saving small pieces of metal that quietly record history in their designs and materials. The 1979 D penny also represents the idea that value in coin collecting isn't always about price. Sometimes it's about condition, rarity within a massive population, or the excitement of finding something unusual where you least expect it. It's about holding a piece of the past in your hand and realizing that even something as simple as a penny can connect you to another time. And here's something to think about. Somewhere right now, there could be a 1979 D penny sitting in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten wallet, waiting to be noticed. It might not be worth much, or it might be an error coin that surprises its owner. Either way, it carries with it a story that most people will never hear unless they stop, look closely, and ask a simple question: What's the story behind this coin? The next time you see a penny dated 1979 with a small d under the year, take a moment to really look at it. Feel its weight, notice its color, and think about where it's been. That coin has passed through countless hands, witnessed decades of change, and survived in a world where many people now ignore small change altogether. And who knows? That ordinary-looking penny might not make you rich, but it might spark curiosity, connect you to history, and remind you that sometimes the most overlooked objects carry the most interesting stories. Imagine holding a penny that looks completely ordinary, yet could quietly be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Most people would spend it without a second thought. But one small detail, the year 1982 and a tiny D mint mark, could change everything. This is the story of the 1982 D Lincoln penny, one of the most misunderstood and fascinating modern coins in American history. The 1982 D Lincoln cent is a 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint during a year of massive change for U.S. money. At first glance, it looks just like any other Lincoln penny. Abraham Lincoln faces right on the front, calm and dignified, while the Lincoln Memorial sits quietly on the back. But this coin carries a hidden story, one about rising metal prices, secret weight changes, rare varieties, and collectors discovering treasures in everyday pocket change. To understand why the 1982 D penny matters, we need to travel back to the early 1980s. At that time, copper prices were climbing fast. In fact, the metal inside a penny was becoming worth more than the penny itself. The U.S. Mint faced a serious problem. If it cost more than 1 cent to make a 1-cent coin, the entire system would stop making sense. For decades before 1982, pennies were made mostly of copper. Each coin weighed about 3.11 grams and felt solid in the hand. But by 1982, that copper had become too expensive. The mint decided to switch materials. Instead of using mostly copper, they changed to zinc-coated with a thin layer of copper. This reduced the weight of the penny to about 2.5 grams and saved millions of dollars in production costs. Here's where things get interesting. The change didn't happen overnight. Throughout 1982, both copper and zinc pennies were made at the same time. Some were struck at Philadelphia, and some were struck at Denver, which added the small D mint mark under the date. Even more surprising, some coins were made with different styles of numbers in the date, large date and small date varieties. So in a single year, collectors ended up with multiple combinations: copper large date, copper small date, zinc large date, zinc small date, and all of these were made both with and without mint marks. That makes 1982 one of the most complicated and collectible years in Lincoln cent history. The 1982 D penny is especially fascinating because Denver struck coins on both copper and zinc planchets, but not every variety was supposed to exist. Some combinations were not officially documented at first, and that mystery led collectors to search through jars, rolls, and bank boxes for years, hoping to uncover rare transitional errors. Now let's talk about what this coin looks like. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner in 1909. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty. To the right is the date, 1982, and just below that, the tiny D mint mark, showing it was made in Denver. Around the edges is the phrase, "In God We Trust." On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, which had been used since 1959 to honor Lincoln's 150th birthday. Between the columns, if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. Above it reads, United States of America, and below, 1 cent. To most people, it's just a penny. But collectors know that the real value of the 1982 D cent lies inside, in what it's made of, how much it weighs, and whether it carries rare mistakes. The easiest way to tell whether your 1982 D penny is copper or zinc is by weight. A copper penny weighs about 3.11 grams. A zinc penny weighs about 2.5 grams. Even holding them in your hand, you can sometimes feel the difference. Copper coins feel heavier and more solid, while zinc coins feel slightly lighter and thinner, but weight isn't the only difference. Some 1982 pennies were struck with large date numerals and others with small date numerals. The small date variety has thinner, more delicate numbers, especially noticeable in the 8 and the 2. The large date version has thicker, bolder numbers that stand out more strongly. Now here's where rarity enters the picture. One of the rarest modern Lincoln cents is the 1982D small date copper penny. This coin was never supposed to exist. When the mint switched to zinc, small date dies were already in use. But copper planchets were supposed to be phased out. Somehow, a small number of copper blanks was still around and were struck with small date dies at the Denver Mint. This created a coin that collectors had never officially seen before. For years, experts believed it didn't exist at all. But then a few examples surfaced, and everything changed. Today, confirmed 1982D small date copper pennies are considered among the rarest circulation-era Lincoln cents. Only a handful are known to exist. Because of that, they have sold for astonishing prices. One example in excellent condition sold at auction for over $18,000. Another confirmed piece brought more than $10,000. And as awareness grows, collectors continue searching, hoping to discover another one hiding in an old jar of pennies. Even beyond that legendary variety, other 1982D pennies can carry value depending on condition and eras. High-grade uncirculated coins with sharp detail and clean surfaces can sell for several dollars to collectors. Coins with striking errors, such as off-center strikes, double strikes, or wrong metal compositions, can also bring premiums. Some 1982D pennies have been found struck on leftover copper blanks when they were supposed to be zinc, creating transitional errors. Others show doubling in the lettering or date, caused by misaligned dies during striking. These errors are highly collectible because they are accidental, unrepeatable, and visually interesting. Collectors love error coins because they feel like discoveries rather than purchases. They represent moments when something went wrong at the mint, and those mistakes escaped into circulation, where they waited quietly for someone to notice. So how can you tell if your 1982D penny might be special? First, check the mint mark. Look under the date and confirm the small d. Next, weigh the coin if you can. A digital scale that measures to 2 decimal places is ideal. If the coin weighs close to 3.11 grams, it's copper. If it weighs about 2.5 grams, it's zinc. Then examine the date style. Compare your coin to online reference images of large date and small date varieties. Pay close attention to the shape of the 8 and the height of the 2. On the small date, the 2 looks shorter and more delicate, and the top of the 8 is smaller than the bottom. On the large date, the numbers appear thicker and more evenly sized. If you ever find a 1982D penny that is both copper and small date, stop immediately. Do not clean it, do not polish it, do not scratch it. Cleaning a coin destroys its collector value. Instead, store it safely in a holder and consider having it authenticated by a professional coin grading service. Be cautious of fakes, too. Some people try to alter common 1982 copper large date pennies to resemble the rare small date variety by reshaping the numbers. Others plate zinc coins to mimic copper weight. A genuine example will have correct weight, correct metal composition, and correct die characteristics confirmed by experts. A strong magnet test can also help. Zinc pennies are not magnetic, but neither are copper pennies, so magnet testing alone isn't enough. Weight and professional verification matter most. One of the most surprising facts about the 1982D penny is that millions of Americans have probably already handled coins that could have been worth thousands of dollars and never knew it. Because these pennies circulated normally, they ended up in cash registers, piggy banks, couch cushions, and coin jars across the country. Another fun fact is that 1982 is the only year in U.S. history where pennies were officially produced in both copper and zinc in the same year for circulation. No other year created such a complex mix of varieties. That makes it a favorite among collectors who enjoy searching rather than simply buying rare coins. The Lincoln cent itself also has deep historical meaning. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday, making it the first U.S. coin to feature a real person rather than a symbolic figure like Liberty. By 1982, Lincoln had already been on the penny for over 70 years, making him one of the longest-running portraits in American coinage. Collectors today love the 1982 D penny not because it looks flashy, but because it tells a story. It represents a turning point in American money, the moment when rising costs forced the government to abandon traditional copper coinage. It also represents how even modern coins can hide rare treasures, waiting patiently to be discovered by someone curious enough to look closely. This coin reminds people that valuable collectibles aren't always locked behind glass in museums or auction houses. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, passed from hand to hand without anyone realizing their potential worth. Many collectors began their journeys by searching through everyday change. The 1982 D penny continues that tradition, offering both beginners and experienced numismatists a reason to slow down, examine, and appreciate the small details. It turns ordinary moments into treasure hunts. And perhaps the most exciting part of all is this: new discoveries are still possible. Even today, people occasionally report finding rare 1982 varieties in old rolls, inherited coin collections, or forgotten jars in basements and drawers. The story of this coin isn't finished. Somewhere out there, another rare example may still be waiting to be found. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1982 with a tiny D under the year, don't rush to spend it. Hold it, weigh it, look closely at the numbers, because in that small copper-colored circle could be a piece of American history and possibly one of the most valuable modern pennies ever made. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't gold or silver. Sometimes they're hiding in your pocket change, quietly waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Imagine holding a penny that looks completely ordinary, yet could be hiding a secret flaw so rare that collectors have paid thousands of dollars to own it. What if one small detail on a simple 1984 Lincoln penny could turn pocket change into a serious discovery? Today, we're exploring the 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans have seen, spent, and forgotten. Yet a few special examples have become legendary in the coin collecting world. This coin might not look flashy. It's brown, small, and familiar. But behind its everyday appearance lies a fascinating story of history, design, mistakes, and hidden value that continues to excite collectors even decades later. The Lincoln penny has been part of American life since 1909, created to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1984, the design was already more than 75 years old, and the penny had become the most widely circulated coin in the United States. The version with no mint mark means it was struck in Philadelphia, the main U.S. mint facility, which traditionally did not place a mint mark on pennies until recent years. So if your 1984 penny has no letter under the date, that's exactly how it should be. In 1984, the U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies each year. Inflation was rising, copper prices were climbing, and the cost of making a penny was becoming a serious concern for the government. Just 2 years earlier, in 1982, the mint had changed the penny's composition from mostly copper to mostly zinc, coated with a thin layer of copper. By 1984, the zinc-based penny was fully standard, meaning most 1984 pennies are much lighter than older copper cents, even though they look nearly the same. The design of the 1984 penny features Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front, based on a sculpture by Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. On the back is the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, You can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making this one of the few US coins to feature the same person on both sides. At first glance, the 1984 no mint mark penny doesn't seem special. It was produced in massive numbers, with over 7 billion coins struck in Philadelphia alone. That's billion with a B. Most of these coins are still worth exactly 1 cent today, especially if they're worn or damaged from circulation. But within this ocean of ordinary pennies, a tiny group of extraordinary errors exists, and those are what make this coin so fascinating. The most famous and valuable variety of the 1984 penny is known as the 1984 doubled ear Lincoln cent. This error happened during the coin-making process when the die used to strike the coins was misaligned during its creation. As a result, Lincoln's ear appears doubled, almost like a shadow or echo behind it. It's not something you can easily see with the naked eye unless you know exactly where to look, but once you spot it, it's unmistakable. This doubling is not damage, it's not wear, it's not a trick of light. It's a true mint error created before the coin was ever struck, making it highly collectible. And unlike some rare coins that are valuable because only a few were made, the doubled ear penny is valuable because only a few escaped detection and destruction during production. What makes the 1984 doubled ear especially exciting is that it wasn't discovered immediately. For years, these coins circulated quietly, mixed in with billions of normal pennies. Some people probably spent them at gas stations, dropped them into coin jars, or tossed them into couch cushions without ever realizing what they had. It wasn't until collectors began examining 1984 cents more closely that the error became widely known. Now let's talk about value, because that's what everyone wants to know. A normal 1984 no mint mark penny in circulated condition is worth 1 cent. In uncirculated condition, meaning it was never used in daily commerce and still looks brand new, it might be worth a few cents to maybe $1 to collectors who want complete date sets. But the doubled ear variety is a completely different story. Verified examples of the 1984 doubled ear penny have sold for hundreds and even thousands of dollars, depending on condition. Coins in circulated condition, where the doubling is still clearly visible but the coin shows wear, have sold for $200 to $500. Better examples in high-grade uncirculated condition have sold for $1,000, $2,000, and in rare cases, even more at major auctions. One of the highest profile sales involved a professionally graded 1984 doubled ear penny in near-perfect condition that sold for over $3,000. And that's for a coin that originally cost 1 cent. That kind of return is what makes collectors and everyday people alike start checking their change more carefully. So how can you tell if you might have one of these rare pennies? First, confirm the basics. The coin should be dated 1984 and have no mint mark under the date, meaning it was made in Philadelphia. Next, focus on Lincoln's ear on the front of the coin. On normal pennies, the ear looks clean and well-defined. On the doubled ear variety, you'll see a second outline or ridge behind the ear, giving it a thicker or layered appearance. The doubling is most noticeable on the lower part of the ear and the earlobe. You don't need expensive equipment to check. A simple magnifying glass or phone camera zoom can often reveal it, but be careful. Many coins show damage, scratches, or wear that can look like doubling. True doubled dies have smooth, rounded shapes that match the original design, not jagged or rough edges. If you think you've found one, the next step is professional verification. Coin grading services like PCGS or NGC can authenticate your coin and assign it a grade. This not only confirms whether it's real, but also dramatically increases its market value because buyers trust certified coins. It's important to know that fake or altered coins do exist. Some people try to carve or modify regular pennies to imitate the doubled ear effect. These fakes usually show tool marks, unnatural lines, or uneven surfaces. Genuine doubled ear pennies have smooth, consistent doubling that looks like it was part of the original design, because it was. Beyond the famous doubled ear, the 1984 penny also has other minor errors that collectors enjoy searching for. These include off-center strikes, where the design is shifted toward the edge, broad strikes that lack a raised rim, clipped planchets where part of the coin is missing, and even die cracks or die breaks that create raised lines across the surface. While most of these errors aren't worth thousands, some can sell for $20, $50, or more, depending on how dramatic they are. One of the most surprising things about the 1984 penny is how modern it is. This isn't a coin from the 1800s or early 1900s. Many people watching this video were alive when these pennies were made. Some may have spent them as kids, dropped them into arcade machines, or saved them in piggy banks. The idea that a coin from everyday life in the 1980s could now be worth thousands makes it feel personal, relatable, and exciting. There's also something deeply appealing about the hunt. Unlike rare gold coins locked away in museums or private collections, 1984 pennies are still out there. They're in old jars, drawers, inherited collections, and sometimes even in circulation. Every time someone checks their change and finds nothing, they're one step closer to the possibility of finding something extraordinary next time. Here's a fun fact. The 1984 doubled ear penny is considered one of the most famous double die varieties in modern U.S. coinage, right alongside the 1955 double die cent and the 1972 double die cent. But unlike those older varieties, which are often heavily worn or already locked into collections, the 1984 version still surfaces occasionally in fresh condition. That means the story isn't over yet. New discoveries still happen. Another surprising detail is how small the error really is. It's not a giant misprint or a missing design. It's a subtle doubling on a tiny part of Lincoln's ear. Yet that tiny mistake is enough to turn a 1-cent coin into a 4-figure collectible. It's a powerful reminder that in coin collecting, small details matter more than age, size, or even metal content. Collectors love the 1984 doubled ear penny not just for its value, but for its story. It represents the hidden side of mass production, the human and mechanical imperfections that slip through even the most advanced systems. Billions of pennies were struck in 1984, yet only a small number carry this famous flaw. That contrast between massive production and microscopic rarity is what makes this coin so compelling. It also appeals to both beginners and experienced collectors. Beginners love it because it's something they might realistically find without spending money. Experienced collectors love it because it's a recognized variety with strong demand, documented sales, and lasting popularity. It sits at the perfect intersection of accessibility and significance. Another reason this coin remains popular is trust. The 1984 doubled ear is well documented, widely accepted, and easy to identify compared to many other era coins. There's no debate about whether it's real or collectible. It's listed in major reference books, recognized by grading services, and actively traded in the market. That makes it one of the safest modern era coins to collect. And let's not forget the emotional side. There's something thrilling about the idea that a rare treasure might already be in your possession, hiding in plain sight. It turns everyday objects into potential discoveries and transforms routine actions, like counting spare change, into moments of possibility. That sense of wonder is at the heart of coin collecting. Even if you never find one, learning about coins like the 1984 doubled ear penny changes how you see money. You start noticing details, dates, mint marks, and designs. You realize that coins aren't just tools for spending. They're tiny historical artifacts, each carrying stories of economics, politics, technology, and human error. So what should you do if you want to start looking? First, gather your pennies. Old jars, drawers, inherited collections, and forgotten containers are great places to start. Focus on 1984 pennies with no mint mark. Examine Lincoln's ear closely under magnification. If you think you see doubling, compare it to verified images online or in coin guides. And if you believe you've found something special, Consider professional authentication before selling or trading it. Even if your penny turns out to be ordinary, the process itself is rewarding. You gain knowledge, sharpen your eye, and join a community of collectors who share stories, discoveries, and excitement over the smallest details. The 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny reminds us that rarity isn't always about age or gold. Sometimes, it's about a momentary mistake frozen in metal, waiting decades to be noticed. It shows how everyday objects can carry extraordinary stories and how curiosity can transform the ordinary into something unforgettable. So the next time you see a penny on the ground, don't walk past it, pick it up. Turn it over, look closely, because hidden among millions of ordinary coins could be a tiny piece of history worth far more than its face value. And you'll never know unless you look. That's the magic of the 1984 Lincoln penny. A coin that proves that sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest surprises. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket that looks completely ordinary but could be hiding a story worth far more than 1 cent. A coin struck during one of America's most important modern transitions, a penny that millions of people spent without a second thought, yet today collectors quietly search for in their change jars and old collections. This is the story of the 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln penny and why this small copper coin still captures big attention. The 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1 cent coin made by the United States Mint in Philadelphia. When a penny has no mint mark under the date, it means it was struck in Philadelphia, which traditionally didn't use mint marks on most pennies at that time. At first glance, it looks just like countless other Lincoln cents. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial sits on the back. But behind this simple design is a moment in U.S. coin history that makes this penny far more interesting than most people realize. To understand why the 1988 penny matters, we need to step back in time. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real person. Over the decades, the design stayed mostly the same, especially the front portrait by sculptor Victor David Brenner, which has become one of the most recognizable images in American currency. By 1988, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for nearly 80 years. The back design showing the Lincoln Memorial had been introduced in 1959, replacing the wheat stalk design that collectors now call wheat pennies. The 1988 penny belongs to this memorial era, a time when pennies were still seen as essential everyday money, used constantly in stores, vending machines, and parking meters. But 1988 stands out for another reason. It falls right in the middle of a major change in penny composition. For most of American history, pennies were made mostly of copper. But rising copper prices in the early 1980s made it expensive to produce coins with so much metal value. So in 1982, the U.S. Mint switched to a new composition. Pennies became mostly zinc, coated with a thin layer of copper on the outside. This created a fascinating situation. In 1982, both copper and zinc pennies were made. And for several years afterward, the public was still getting used to the idea that their pennies were no longer solid copper. By 1988, the zinc-based penny had become standard, but many people still assumed all older-looking pennies were copper. This makes the 1988 penny part of a transitional era in American coinage, when tradition met modern cost-saving changes. Now let's take a closer look at the coin itself. The 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln penny weighs about 2.5 grams and is made of 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating. It measures 19 millimeters across and has a smooth edge. On the front, you'll see Lincoln's portrait, along with the words "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date, 1988. Under the date, there is no mint mark, showing it was made in Philadelphia. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial is shown in fine detail, and if you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial between the pillars. Above it are the words United States of America, and below it, 1 cent. At the top, in smaller letters, you'll see e pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. At first glance, millions of these coins look exactly the same. In fact, more than 5 billion 1988 pennies were made at the Philadelphia Mint alone. That huge number might make you think none of them could ever be valuable. But in the world of coin collecting, value doesn't always come from how many coins were made. Sometimes it comes from condition, mistakes, and hidden varieties that only sharp eyes notice. One of the biggest reasons collectors care about the 1988 no mint mark penny is because of rare errors and varieties. Most people never examine their coins closely, so unusual details often slip through unnoticed. But collectors know that even small differences in lettering, metal composition, or strike quality can turn an everyday coin into a prized collectible. One well-known variety connected to the late 1980s Lincoln cents is the doubled die era. This happens when the coin die strikes the design slightly off, creating a doubling effect on letters or numbers. On some pennies, the date or the word liberty can appear doubled, especially when viewed under magnification. While not all doubled images are valuable, true doubled die errors can bring significant premiums, especially in high-grade condition. Another issue collectors watch for in 1988 pennies is off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned on the coin blank. These coins often look strange or incomplete, and the more dramatic the misalignment, the more interesting they become to collectors. Some off-center strikes still show the full date, which makes them especially desirable. Then there are broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the collar that normally holds it in place, causing it to spread out wider than normal. These errors give the coin a distorted shape and often look larger than a standard penny. Again, while these errors are uncommon, they are real, and they do show up from time to time among 1988 pennies. Perhaps most intriguing are transitional errors, where a coin is struck on the wrong metal planchet. In rare cases, a penny might be struck on a blank intended for another denomination, such as a dime or foreign coin. These are extremely rare, but when they occur, they can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. While no widely confirmed cases are known specifically for 1988 Lincoln cents on wrong planchets, collectors still watch closely because surprises do happen. Condition also plays a major role in value. Most 1988 pennies were heavily circulated and show wear, scratches, and dull surfaces. These are typically worth only face value, but uncirculated examples, especially those with strong luster and no visible marks, can be worth significantly more to collectors building complete Lincoln cent sets. Coins graded in mint state condition by professional grading services often sell for anywhere from a few dollars to several dozen dollars, depending on the grade. The higher the grade, the sharper the details and shinier the surfaces. A nearly perfect example can command much higher prices than one pulled from pocket change. There have been auction results that show how condition matters. High-grade 1988 no-mint mark pennies certified in top condition have sold for $50, $75, or more, depending on demand at the time. While that might not sound life-changing, remember that the coin originally cost just 1 cent. That's a return few other everyday objects can match. Error coins can bring even stronger prices. A genuine doubled die 1988 penny, if confirmed by a grading service, can sell for hundreds of dollars, depending on how dramatic the doubling is and how well preserved the coin remains. Off-center strikes and broad strikes can also sell for anywhere from $20 to several $100s, depending on how unusual they appear and whether the date is fully visible. So how can you tell if you have a real 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln penny worth looking into? Start by checking the date and the area below it. If there's no letter under the year, that's normal for Philadelphia pennies from this era. Next, look closely at the letters in Liberty, In God We Trust, and the numbers in the date. Use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom to check for doubling or unusual shapes. Then examine the overall strike. Is the design centered? Are parts missing or unusually close to the edge? Does the coin look wider or thinner than normal? These could be signs of mint errors. Also look at the surface color. A normal 1988 penny should have a reddish-brown copper look, but if it appears silvery or unusually pale, that could signal something unusual, though it could also be damage or plating. Weight is another helpful clue. A normal 1988 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If you have a precise scale and your coin weighs significantly more or less, it might be worth further investigation. But always remember that damage, corrosion, or wear can also affect weight. When it comes to spotting fakes, it's good to know that most counterfeiters don't bother with common-date modern pennies because the profit margin is low. Still, altered coins do exist. Some people plate pennies with other metals or modify dates. Look for signs of tampering, such as uneven surfaces, strange textures, or areas where metal appears filed or reshaped. If you think you've found something special, a professional coin dealer or grading service can help authenticate it. Now let's talk about a few fun facts about the 1988 penny. One interesting detail is that this coin was minted during a time when the US Mint was experimenting with improving production efficiency. The late 1980s saw advancements in machinery and quality control that helped reduce errors compared to earlier decades. This makes true errors from this period more interesting to collectors because they're less common than in some earlier years. Another fun detail is that many people who grew up in the 1980s still remember these pennies vividly. They were the coins used to buy candy, play arcade games, and drop into wishing fountains. For some collectors, the 1988 penny isn't just metal and numbers. It's a piece of personal history tied to childhood memories and everyday moments. The Lincoln Memorial design itself has become a collector favorite because of the hidden Lincoln statue inside the building. On well-struck coins, you can clearly see Lincoln seated inside the memorial, making it one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. This tiny detail fascinates new collectors once they notice it for the first time, and it's often what sparks deeper interest in Lincoln's sense. Collectors also love the challenge of building complete date and mint mark sets. Even though the 1988 no mint mark penny is common, finding one in top condition straight from circulation is surprisingly difficult. Most have tiny nicks, dull spots, or surface marks. That makes high-grade examples feel like small victories even when the coin itself is inexpensive. Another reason collectors enjoy coins like this is because they remind us that valuable finds don't always look valuable at first glance. Many rare or high-grade coins have been sitting unnoticed in jars, drawers, and old piggy banks for decades. The idea that something ordinary could turn out to be special keeps people checking their change and revisiting old collections. The 1988 no mint mark penny also plays a role in teaching new collectors how to examine coins carefully. Because it's easy to find, beginners can practice spotting strike quality, surface condition, and design details without worrying about damaging an expensive coin. Over time, this builds the skills needed to recognize rarer and more valuable pieces. And while most 1988 pennies are only worth face value, the few that stand out remind us of an important truth in numismatics. Rarity doesn't always come from low mintage alone. It can come from mistakes, exceptional preservation, and unexpected variations that survive against the odds. In many ways, this penny represents the hidden side of modern coin collecting. It shows that even coins from recent decades, coins many people still remember using every day, can hold stories, surprises, and real value for those who know what to look for. It's not just about age. It's about history, condition, and chance. So the next time you come across a 1988 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to look closer, tilt it in the light, check the letters and numbers. Notice the tiny Lincoln inside the memorial. You might be holding nothing more than a common coin, or you might be holding a small piece of American minting history with a story few people ever notice. Coins like this remind us that history isn't always locked in museums or hidden in vaults. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting to be discovered. And that's what makes the 1988 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny so fascinating. It's ordinary yet full of potential, common yet still capable of surprise. And for collectors, that sense of possibility is what keeps the hunt alive. So keep checking your change, keep opening those old jars, and keep looking closely at the coins you've always taken for granted. Because sometimes, the most interesting stories start with the smallest pieces of metal. And sometimes, that story begins with a penny dated 1988 with no mint mark at all.